God makes no mistakes on who he puts in your life. Marriage is about love, trust, and friendship and unity. We marry for sickness and health, to death do us part. Our daughter Shanann loved you with all of her heart. Your children loved you to the moon and back. Shannon's family was her world. Shanann put a crown on your head. But unfortunately, the day that you took their life, God removed that crown. We loved you like a son. We trusted you. Your faithful wife trusted you. Your children adored you, and they also trusted you. Your daughter Bella Marie sang a song proudly. And I don't know if you got to see it, but it was, "Daddy, you're my hero." I have no idea who gave you the right to take their lives. But I know God and his mighty angels were there at that moment to bring them home to paradise. God gives us free will. Families are not only your family of four. You took your own life. I want the world to know that our daughter and her children were so loved by us. There will always be protected by God and his mighty angels. I didn't want death for you because that's not my right. Your life is between you and God now, and I pray that he has mercy for you. From Shannon's mother, Bella Marie, Celeste, Catherine, and Nico Lee.
The air in Frederick, Colorado, on the morning of August 13, 2018, carried the typical crisp chill of a high plains late summer. It was a place designed for safety. Subdivisions lined with pristine, cookie-cutter two-story homes stood beneath an endless blue sky, offering an idealized haven for young families looking to plant their roots. But inside the quiet walls of 2825 Saratoga Trail, an invisible, suffocating rot had already consumed the foundation of what the world believed to be a picture-perfect life. By midday, that manufactured illusion began to crumble in a very public way. A local police officer stands on the front porch, the relentless hum of his body camera capturing a scene of quiet, mounting panic. Beside him is a frantic friend, her voice trembling as she explains that a 34-year-old pregnant mother, Shanann Watts, has missed a critical medical appointment and has ceased all communication. For someone who lived her life out loud on social media, whose existence was meticulously documented for thousands of followers, this sudden, absolute silence is a flashing red siren. Moments later, a white pickup truck pulls aggressively into the driveway. Out steps Christopher Watts. He walks with a casual, almost detached gait, a stark contrast to the urgency vibrating through the air. He wears a calm smile that does not reach his eyes. As he unlocks the front door, letting the authorities and a desperate family friend inside, the atmosphere changes instantly. The house is completely dark, chilled by an aggressively running air conditioner, and entirely, unnervingly still. What the searchers find inside only deepens the dread. Shannon's car sits locked in the garage. The car seats for her two young daughters, 4-year-old Bella and 3-year-old Celeste, still securely fastened inside. Her purse sits on the kitchen counter, containing her wallet, her keys, and the vital medication her children need. Most chilling of all, her cell phone, the device that was practically an extension of her hand, is found wedged between the cushions of a sofa, completely powered down. There is no sign of a struggle, no broken glass, and no forced entry. Yet, an entire family has simply vanished into thin air, leaving behind the modern anchors of their existence. As the sun begins to set over the subdivision, Christopher Watts steps onto his front porch to face local news cameras. The performance he gives will linger in the minds of true crime viewers for years to come. He sways from side to side, a nervous, hollow grin occasionally flickering across his face. He speaks of his missing daughters and his pregnant wife not with the agonizing terror of a desperate father, but with the flat, clinical detachment of a casual bystander. He glances everywhere except directly into the camera lens, pleading for their safe return in a monotone voice that sounds entirely rehearsed. But behind the scenes, behind the eerie television interviews and the frantic neighborhood searches, an entirely different narrative is taking shape in the shadows. The public sees a grieving husband caught in a living nightmare. Investigators, however, are beginning to look past the carefully curated social media posts and the manicured lawn. They are looking into the dark corners of a marriage that had secretly devolved into an emotional war zone. And years later, a devastating perspective would shatter what little understanding the public thought they had of this tragedy. Shanann's mother, Sandra Arzusek, would break her silence to reveal the harrowing truths that lay hidden beneath the surface of that final, fateful summer. Truths about the unseen signs, the spiritual intuition of a mother, and the terrifying reality of what actually occurred before the world ever learned the name Watts. If you enjoyed this gripping introduction, please take a moment to hit that like button, subscribe to True Crime Tales, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an episode. What are your initial thoughts on Chris's eerie behavior on the porch? Let us know in the comments below. To understand how the quiet on Saratoga Trail fractured so completely, it is necessary to look backward, into the years before the cameras arrived. To the outside world looking through the window of social media, Shanann and Chris Watts were the definition of a modern success story. Shannon's digital footprint was filled with vibrant videos, smiling family photos, and enthusiastic posts celebrating her marriage, her children, and her career. She often referred to Chris as her rock, the man who had supported her through severe health struggles and helped her build the life she had always dreamed of. The couple had met in North Carolina, a time when Shanann was battling the debilitating effects of lupus. Chris had emerged as a dedicated partner, standing by her side through medical challenges and providing a sense of stability. When they relocated to Colorado, they seemed determined to build an ideal future. They purchased a grand, spacious home, filled it with beautiful things, and welcomed two daughters, Bella and Celeste, whose bright smiles became a staple of Shannon's frequent online updates. But behind the filtered lenses and the upbeat captions, the reality was far more complex. The pressures of maintaining an expensive lifestyle had begun to mount. Financial strain was an invisible but constant weight, leading to a bankruptcy filing in 2015 and ongoing stress regarding the upkeep of their home and lifestyle. While Shanann threw her energy into a direct sales marketing job that required her to travel and maintain a highly polished public persona, Chris remained relatively quiet, working as an oil-field operator. As the summer of 2018 approached, the emotional distance between the two began to widen. Friends later noted that the dynamic in the household had shifted. Shanann went to North Carolina with the children for an extended 6-week summer vacation to visit her family, leaving Chris behind in Colorado. It was during this separation that the silence between them grew heavy. The frequent, affectionate text messages that had once defined their communication began to dwindle, replaced by short, formal responses from Chris. When Shanann returned home to Colorado briefly before another business trip, she confided in close friends that something felt deeply wrong. The warmth in her marriage had vanished, replaced by an icy detachment. She expressed confusion and heartbreak over Chris's sudden emotional withdrawal, noting that he seemed entirely absent even when standing in the same room. What the public, and even Shannon's closest confidants, did not yet know was that the quiet operator was living a double life, and the foundation of their shared existence was already entirely fractured. The 6 weeks Shanann and the children spent in North Carolina during the summer of 2018 marked the definitive turning point. From a distance, the separation was meant to be a routine family visit, but the digital trail left behind revealed a marriage in freefall. Shannon's text messages to her husband during this period shifted from affection to growing desperation. She questioned his sudden lack of interest, his cold tone, and his refusal to engage in conversations about their upcoming third child. Unbeknownst to Shanann, the distance between them was not merely psychological. Back in Colorado, Chris had begun a relationship with a coworker, creating an entirely separate reality for himself. He was frequenting restaurants, visiting bars, and looking for apartments, effectively auditioning for a new life that did not include his family. The financial and emotional obligations of his current existence were increasingly viewed as obstacles to this desired future. When Shanann finally returned to Colorado in August, the tension inside the home was palpable. Friends who saw her during those final days described her as exhausted and deeply anxious, yet determined to fix the relationship. She booked a weekend getaway for the two of them and purchased books on marriage counseling, searching for any way to bridge the chasm that had opened between them. On the weekend of August 11, Shanann left for a brief business trip to Arizona, leaving Chris alone with the girls. It would be her final journey. Throughout the weekend, her communication with friends centered almost entirely on her marital distress. Her flight home was delayed, pushing her arrival into the early morning hours of Monday, August 13. A close friend dropped her off at the Saratoga Trail home just after 2 in the morning, watching as Shanann walked through the front door, unaware that the quiet interior had become an entirely hostile environment. Within mere hours, the silence from the house would trigger the welfare check that exposed the crisis to the world. By the afternoon of August 13, 2018, the quiet suburban home on Saratoga Trail was no longer a private residence. It had become an active investigation site. With Shanann and the children officially declared missing, local authorities and the Federal Bureau of Investigation stepped in, rapidly transforming the search from a standard welfare check into a high-stakes missing persons case. As investigators combed through the home, the complete absence of physical disruption stood in stark contrast to the family's sudden disappearance. There were no signs of a break-in, no forced entry, and no evidence of a struggle within the pristine rooms. However, the digital forensic evidence began to tell an entirely different story. Law enforcement obtained search warrants for the family's electronic devices, uncovering the widening fracture in the marriage, and tracking the physical movements of Chris's vehicle via GPS data from his employer. The turning point in the initial investigation came when police reviewed neighborhood security footage. A neighbor's outdoor camera had captured Chris backing his work truck up to the garage early that morning, loading items into the truck bed, and driving away. This timeline conflicted heavily with his initial statements to the media and investigators regarding when he last saw his family. Faced with inconsistencies in his timeline and the mounting digital evidence gathered by detectives, Chris was brought in for formal questioning. Over hours of intense interrogation, the narrative of a worried father completely dissolved. Investigators presented the data linking his truck's movements to a remote oil field site where he had been stationed that morning. Realizing the authorities had dismantled his alibi, the defense of a sudden disappearance was abandoned, and the investigation shifted focus from a rescue operation to the recovery of the victims at the designated field site. In the legal and emotional aftermath of the investigation, the focus shifted from the tactical movements of law enforcement to the human cost left in the wake of the tragedy. For the Arzusek family, the conclusion of the immediate police pursuit did not bring peace. Instead, it marked the beginning of a public and painful journey to preserve the memory of their loved ones. Shannon's mother, Sandra Arzusek, along with her husband Frank, stood before the public to provide a stark contrast to the silence that had once filled the home on Saratoga Trail. During the formal legal proceedings and subsequent public statements, Sandra shared the profound weight of navigating a loss that played out under a global spotlight. She spoke openly about the internal instinct that told her something was fundamentally wrong long before the official updates were delivered by detectives. This maternal intuition, she explained, was a quiet guide during the agonizing days of the initial search, sustaining her when the public presentation of the marriage began to unravel in the news. The family's public reflections also focused on correcting the narrative surrounding Shanann. In the wake of the case's resolution, online speculation and legal documentation threatened to overshadow the reality of who Shanann was as a person and a mother. Sandra used her platform to describe a daughter who was deeply dedicated to her children's well-being, an energetic professional, and a woman who fought to keep her family unified despite the growing emotional distance from her partner. By addressing the public directly, the Arzusek family sought to ensure that the legacy of Shanann, Bella, and Celeste remained anchored in their lives, rather than the manner of their absence. Their statements emphasized the resilience required to face a sudden and complete loss while under constant scrutiny, transforming their private grief into a documented testament to the family they lost. The legal proceedings moved with a swiftness that stood in sharp contrast to the agonizing days of the initial search. Faced with an overwhelming mountain of forensic evidence, digital trails, and his own conflicting statements to investigators, Chris Watts chose to bypass a lengthy, high-profile trial. In November 2018, a plea agreement was finalized in a Weld County courtroom, a decision made in consultation with Shanann's family to avoid the prolonged trauma of a public display of evidence. During the sentencing hearing, the courtroom was heavy with the collective grief of the community and the Arzusek family. Prosecutors laid out the absolute finality of the crime, presenting the timeline that led from the quiet subdivision to the remote oil fields. The defense offered no substantial argument against the charges, acknowledging the reality of the evidence compiled by local and federal authorities. The judge handed down multiple consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, ensuring that the legal penalty matched the severity of the loss. For the public and the media surrounding the courthouse, the sentencing marked the formal closing of the criminal case. However, for those who knew the family, the legal finality was merely the beginning of a long process of processing the sudden void left behind, leaving a community permanently altered by the events that transpired behind the closed doors of Saratoga Trail. The echoes of the tragedy extended far beyond the walls of the Weld County Courthouse, leaving a permanent mark on the community of Frederick and the public at large. The suburban neighborhood, once defined by its quiet streets and manicured lawns, became an impromptu memorial site. Strangers and neighbors alike gathered outside the empty house on Saratoga Trail, leaving behind mountains of stuffed animals, flowers, and handwritten notes to honor the memory of a young mother and her 2 children. For the first responders, investigators, and community members involved in the search, the emotional toll was profound. The case served as a harsh reminder of the unseen struggles that can exist behind a seemingly ideal exterior, prompting widespread discussions about domestic dynamics, mental health, and the pressures of maintaining a curated public image. As the months turned into years, the physical reminders of the event gradually faded, but the collective memory remained intact. The tragedy sparked a renewed focus within the community on supporting families in crisis and ensuring that the names of the victims were remembered for how they lived, rather than how they were lost. The enduring impact of the case became a testament to the resilience of those left behind, who continued to advocate for awareness and healing in the wake of an unimaginable loss. Long after the crime tape was cleared and the quiet suburban routine returned to Saratoga Trail, a lingering question remained suspended over the community. How could an existence that appeared so full of life, love, and future promise vanish so completely into the dark? The legacy of the tragedy stands as a sobering reminder of the invisible fractures that can hide beneath the surface of a seemingly perfect world, leaving an indelible mark on all who followed the story. Ultimately, the memory of Shanann, Bella, and Celeste survives not through the details of the investigation, but through the enduring love of the family who refuses to let them be forgotten. Their story continues to prompt deep reflections on the human condition, the complexity of relationships, and the search for truth in a world of curated illusions. Thank you for watching this deep dive on Crime Secrets Exposed. If this story touched you or made you look a little closer at the world around you, please hit the like button and share this video to help us grow. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another documentary. What are your thoughts on the legacy this case leaves behind? Let us know in the comments below.